Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. Multicellularity evolved several times in eukaryotes. After the first eukaryotes appeared, a great range of unicellular forms evolved, giving rise to the diversity of single-celled eukaryotes that continue to flourish today. But multicellular forms also evolved. Their descendants include a variety of algae, plants, fungi, and animals. The earliest multicellular eukaryotes. Notice that this is look like this one represents all the off-white represents multicellular, and notice the period of multicellular. Notice also the period represents billion, 1, 2, 3, 4 billions of years ago. Notice that. Another look like another period also. Single-celled eukaryotes. Notice also the darkness, or the dark one represents the single-celled eukaryotes. Another also look like photosynthesis and the oxygen. Notice the off-white or the orange one represent atmospheric oxygen. Notice the period also. Notice also the period billions of years ago, 2 to 3. Notice that. Another one, prokaryotes. Notice the off-white or the orange one represents the prokaryotes. Okay. Back to the earliest multicellular eukaryotes. Molecular clocks date the common ancestor of multicellular eukaryotes to 1.5 billion years ago. However, the oldest known fossils of multicellular eukaryotes are of relatively small algae that lived about 1.2 billion years ago. Larger organisms do not appear in the fossil record until several hundred million years later. In the late Proterozoic, Chinese paleontologists recently described a particularly rich site that contains 570 million years old fossils of a diversity of algae and animals, including beautifully preserved structures that are probably animal embryos. Why notice this figure? Voila, represents cell stage to cell stage, closer look, and this one represents later stage. Fossils of Proterozoic animal embryos. Why were multicellular eukaryotes relatively limited in size, diversity, and distribution until the late Proterozoic? Geologic evidence indicates that a severe ice age occurred 750 to 570 million years ago. During this period, glaciers covered the planet's land masses from pole to pole, and the seas were iced over. According to the snowball Earth hypothesis, most life would have been confined to areas near deep sea vents and hot springs, or to those sparse regions of the ocean where enough ice had melted for sunlight to penetrate the surface waters. The fossil record of the first major diversification of multicellular eukaryotes corresponds to the time when snowball Earth thawed. The colonial connection. The first multicellular organisms were colonies, connection of autonomously replicating cells. Notice this figure. Some cells in the colonies became specialized for different functions. The first such specializations had already appeared in the prokaryotic world. In the prokaryotic world, for example, certain cells of the filamentous cyanobacterium nostoc differentiate into nitrogen-fixing cells called heterocysts or heterocysts. Heterocysts, which lose their ability to replicate. The under-differentiated cells are photosynthetic and capable of replicating, with the result that the filaments grow longer and eventually break into smaller filaments. Nostoc has more than 7,000 genes, twice as many as its close relatives that are single cells, such as syncocytes, and many of the additional genes are involved in the regulation of developmental pathways that can lead to cellular differentiation. The evolution of colonies and of cellular specialization was carried much further in eukaryotes. A multicellular eukaryote, such as an animal, generally develops from a single cell, the fertilized egg or zygote in the case of sexual reproduction. Cell division and cell differentiation help transform the single cell into a multicellular organism with many types of specialized cells. Increasing cell specialization made it possible for multicellular organisms to divide particular life functions such as obtaining nutrients and sensing the environments among specific groups of cells. This division of function eventually led to the evolution of tissues, organs, and organ systems in many eukaryotes. Just as evolution of unicellular eukaryotes increased the structural complexity of cells, the evolution of multicellular eukaryotes broke through another threshold in structural organization and provided the stock for new waves of diversification. Multicellularity evolved several times among earlier eukaryotes, giving rise to several ranges of algae as well as to plants, fungi, and animals. The Cambrian explosion. Most of the major phyla of animals appear suddenly in the fossil record that was laid down during the first 20 million years old of the Cambrian period. Notice the blue one represents animals. Notice that the period Cambrian explosion. A phenomena referred to as a Cambrian explosion, fossils of two animal phyla, Nigeria sponges also, are somewhat older, dating from the late Proterozoic. However, molecular clocks suggest that many animal phyla originated and began to diverge much earlier, between 1 billion and 700 million years ago. At the beginning of the Cambrian, for reasons not yet understood, these already divergent phyla expanded in diversity relatively suddenly and simultaneously. The explosion in diversity included many large animals with hard shells and exoskeletons that fossilized easily. Notice back to a colonial eukaryote. Notice this figure. Notice that is this one represents a photosynthetic eukaryote that forms flat colonies. Notice that. Back also to the Cambrian radiation of animal. The bars in this diagram show the earliest appearance in the fossil record of several animal phyla. However, molecular evidence suggests that these phyla may have originated much earlier. What is that? Okay.